Hi, my name is Jordan Etkin. I am a professor here at Fuqua in the marketing area, and I'm here today to talk about some of my research on technology and self-regulation. Broadly, I am interested in how the new tools people are using to help manage or change their behavior actually impact those outcomes, as well as their psychological well-being. For example, personal quantification is a phenomenon I am very interested in relationship to health behaviors, but also more generally. And I use controlled behavioral experiments in conjunction with field studies to examine and test specific hypotheses in this area. A few years ago, I published some work showing that tracking changes what aspects of our behavior we pay attention to. In particular, quantitative output, so the outputs, numerical outputs of what we're doing, versus the experience itself. And that this has meaningful implications for what and how much we actually do of that behavior, as well as how we understand our reasons for engaging in it in the first place. Today, I'm going to go deeper on some new research that builds on those prior findings and specifically examines how the frequency or a number of times we check our progress on something that we're monitoring affects how satisfied we feel with those results. So think about the last time you ordered meal delivery through DoorDash or some similar service, or were waiting for a FedEx package to be delivered. Similarly, maybe you sent out evites to a party or shared a piece of content on social media. In all of these contexts, people face a choice of how often to check progress towards desired outcomes. For example, you can check where your delivery driver is every 5 minutes or every 30 seconds. You could check how many guests have RSVP'd to your party every day or every hour. You could also check how many people have liked your photo every 20 minutes or every 5 or maybe 1 minute. So this raises an interesting question. Are people affected by checking progress towards desired outcomes more or less often? And relatedly, is it good for people? Are they better off if they see their progress feedback more often? So we know from a lot of research that being able to monitor progress at all versus not is important. So compared to having no idea how much has been accomplished or where things stand, people are both more motivated and happier if they have some sense of their progress. So if checking progress is good sort of overall, it is reasonable to think that checking progress more often compared to not would enhance our well-being. What we find in our research, though, is actually the opposite. For a given outcome, for example, a meal delivery that arrives in 30 minutes, people are actually less happy with this result if they checked progress along the way more frequently. My collaborators and I have run over a dozen experiments in a variety of contexts, and this basic finding that people are less happy when they check progress more often is remarkably robust. To give you a feel for our empirical approach, I'll describe this neat experiment we ran with real people placing real DoorDash dinner orders. We pre-screened a sample of online research panelists based on having a DoorDash account and their plans to order dinner that night. Then we told them to order dinner as they normally would and to make note of the time they ordered the food and when it arrived. And crucially, we asked them to observe and record how many times they checked the progress of their order in the app as they waited for their food. Then we sent them a follow-up survey a few hours later after they had received their dinner order and measured their satisfaction with the wait for their food, as well as their likelihood of using DoorDash again in the next couple of weeks. So consistent with our main hypothesis, we found that the more often DoorDash users checked the app to see how much progress their meal delivery driver had made, the less satisfied they were with their experience, and the lower their intentions to use DoorDash again in the near future. We've replicated these findings with a controlled DoorDash simulation study and with experiments where we, as the experimenters, determine how often people could or did check their progress. In addition, in terms of why this occurs, our experiments suggest it's driven by people's expectations. Essentially, people are overly optimistic and also impatient, And so together, when they go to check the current status of some outcome they're monitoring, they often expect more progress to have occurred than actually does. And as a result, they feel disappointed. The more often we check, the more often we have these interim disappointments, and the less happy and satisfied we feel with our final outcomes, even if they're good ones. So why does this matter for entrepreneurs in particular? I see the implications here as threefold. First, as entrepreneurs, you may be checking progress on many things. Customer acquisition, trial, loyalty, revenue, hiring targets, fundraising. There are a lot of metrics you may be tracking over time towards some ideal or desired future outcomes. Further, for many of these, it may be easy to check fairly often. As a first key takeaway from this research, I would say it's important to be intentional about monitoring progress and identifying appropriate intervals for checking those outcomes. Of course, what's appropriate may necessarily be determined on a case-by-case basis, but some good things to consider would be the following. 1, how does this information impact my decision-making? That is, what decisions, actions, or activities would I be implementing or changing based on what I learned from checking my progress? Second, given the first point, how much time needs to transpire between checkpoints for whatever information I get to be meaningful? If I'm evaluating customer acquisition channels, for example, or marketing spend per acquired customer, how frequently or infrequently should I check, daily, weekly, bi-weekly, to have the progress information I observe be diagnostic of what I'm hoping to learn? Note, this means that some metrics are more appropriate to check frequently than others. What's important is that you decide in advance how you want to acquire and interact with this feedback information rather than merely responding to its availability and checking because you feel stressed or anxious or even just because you can. As a second key implication, given the stakes involved, as entrepreneurs, you may be even more likely to check progress more frequently and have very optimistic expectations for what will have occurred, how much change will have happened each time you check. Your company's performance and the outcomes of all of your investments and efforts may also loom particularly large in terms of life satisfaction and a sense of personal self-worth. So, understanding the potential downsides or pitfalls of frequent checking and how it can make even objectively successful outcomes feel dissatisfying may be particularly valuable insights in this context. Third, as entrepreneurs, you may be making decisions around how accessible to make tracking and progress information, and whether and how to integrate reminders or notifications or other features that might encourage your users to check progress more or less frequently. We would all agree that in the world we live in today, attention may be our most scarce resource, and startups have to participate and compete in this attention economy in order to survive. This creates incentives to try to get users or customers to check their progress and engage with your app or company as often as possible. I would caution you, though, to consider the full implications of encouraging such intense engagement around progress monitoring. To illustrate what I mean, in perhaps my favorite experiment from this research, participants performed a simple task, and we gave all of them unlimited opportunities to check their progress or results. For half, though, we introduced a small moment of friction prior to accessing this information. Specifically, we had participants complete a few CAPTCHAs in order to see their results. We found that people assigned to this friction condition checked their progress less often than other participants and were happier with their final outcomes as a result. And importantly, this occurred despite their having an objectively more annoying experience checking CAPTCHAs during the task. So, when you think about designing around feedback provision and tracking tools, there may be upsides in the form of greater customer satisfaction from encouraging less rather than more frequent checking.